Everyone hear us okay? Sounds good?
Testing, testing, virtual live during COVID times.
All right, awesome. We're just waiting for the rest of Ikat to pop up on our screen.
Ooh, what's up,
Oh my gosh, y'all look so good. Oh, it's so cool.
Hey.
All right, cool. We can hear all of you. You can hear us.
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm going to kick it off. My name is Margaret Palaghicon von Rotz. I'm super honored to be here today. And I just wanted to start things off by acknowledging whose lands we're on. So we are Ikat, or Indigenous Knowledge, Art, and Truth. We are Indigenous peoples of the Philippines currently living in the US, but we recognize that we are living on stolen lands. Kerri and I are here in the Undiscovered studio, which is awesome. It looks great. We are on stolen Ohlone land. The other 4 Ikat voices are in San Diego, or what's known as Kumeyaay land. But we also want to make note of the fact that land acknowledgements have to go far beyond just naming the groups that you're living with on this land, right? We have to support them and we have to pay our rent. So hopefully when we get the slides going up, if they're not up already, whoever's supposed to share on Ikat's side, we do have a list of organizations that you should hopefully be paying your rent to and supporting. We have some listed in the Bay Area, some in San Diego, since that's where we're all based. We do have some that are more like national, and we will be sharing that on the Ikat website and Instagram so that folks can know how you can pay your rent and support Indigenous peoples here in the US. So with that, I'm gonna kick it to the other folks at Ikat who are on the Zoom call. They can introduce us and let us know what we're gonna be talking about today.
If we can get the slides. Okay, I'll just start. Hi, everybody. Mapud Yamatugo. My name is Joseph, or J.A. Ruanto-Ramirez. I am part Ifugao. I am from Tuawi people. My father is Ilocano Ifugao from Lagawe. My mom is Sambal, Sambali Ita, and Iranun. And so I identify as multi-indigenous individual and scholar. I am a PhD candidate in cultural studies and American studies at Claremont Graduate University. So some of my works looks at how we Igorot, Moro, Lumbadnon communities in the United States sort of complicate the narrative of what it means to be Filipino or Filipinx, and how we indigenous peoples sort of push back sort of these monolithic and hegemonic identities that are based on national identities. Something that brings me joy is actually that as a scholar, I've been asked by various indigenous peoples, indigenous scholars and graduate students to be their mentor. I have literally just been asked 2 days ago to support an incoming first-year graduate student who wanted to talk about what does it mean to be Kalinga in the United States around health and mental health. There's a lot of us growing indigenous scholars from the Philippines, a lot of particularly the Igorot and Moro communities. And so trying to really think about and complicating those diverse identities in the Philippines and how do we have the hard conversations of diverse cultures and diverse indigenous communities here in the diaspora in the United States. I guess the next one.
Hi everyone, my name is Kerri Somebang. I was born and raised actually right here, Daly City, California. So I hope you guys appreciate the shoes I picked out today. Especially you, Manang Joseph. So I am a scientist. I work at a lab. We're trying to kick off like some COVID research. My indigenous roots are from Sagada and Bisao in Western Bontoc. And what brings me joy about being Igorot is how community is brought together in storytelling. I know this is big everywhere, but for me, it's where I get to learn about what it meant to grow up in the mountains, from daily life traditions to more celebration traditions, to playing gongs, to having just these conversations. Like, I might ask my mom something about like a piece of clothing, say what I'm wearing, and then she'll kick off a story about growing up and planting rice in the rice terraces.
Oh, it's for real.
So and I just think that's amazing that we can bounce from like little things to completely different things. And it's really amazing because I literally kind of had that conversation with my mom the other day. I asked about one thing, went to another, and that's something I really enjoy. I also love just spending time with the, sharing music, spending time with the uncles. You might ask a question about like learning how to play gongs, and that doesn't come with formally asking. It actually comes with hanging out and then just being like, yo, I heard this beat. Can you I don't know, can you correct it for me? Can you show me how it's done? How do you play? Everyone's also very different. So it's just amazing to be able to sit down with other Igorots and listen to all these stories and learn new things about everyone else, because they all different tribes have different traditions, and I like knowing about them all.
That's actually really cool. Like, I didn't think about that, but you're right. Like, everything that we learn about our cultures and our communities and our peoples, like, it's really casual. Like, you don't just go like, oh, like, Lolo, can you teach me this? Like, no, it's just you just ask a simple question, and then your mom is gonna go on and on about how she picked in the rice fields for like every summer, like that type of thing. It's just, it really is through like conversation and storytelling. So it's a good point.
With that, I'm gonna bounce it back to y'all.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is, if I say my full name, it's Kirin Gunawa Amiling Macapugay. I am living here in San Diego. My day job is being a professor at San Diego City College. I am from Kalinga and Bontoc. I was born in Kalinga. So on my mother's side, I'm Kalinga. On my father's side, I am Bontoc. So today we were really asked to share what it is we celebrate about being Indigenous, about our cultures and who we are, and why that's a big part of why we started Ikat, even though several of us have been educating our communities for quite some time, since about 2007. This photo here in front of you is from my actual wedding. I had an Igorot wedding in 2005, October 15th, 2005. So this is my husband, Ben. He is from Pangasinan and Manila, so he's Ilocano Tagalog. So when I speak to my children, I tell them that you're Kalinga, you are Bontoc, you are Tagalog, you are Ilocano. And I want them to understand what that all means. One of the things I celebrate the most about who we are is this passing of tradition. Now, granted, I want to fully acknowledge I have been so fortunate. My parents are tapped into community. My parents are very, very proud of being Igorot. Even in the face of discrimination, they would not have it. So I was raised early on to wear tapis, that's the woven skirt. I was raised to understand my roots, and I was raised to celebrate these roots, these traditions. And because of that, I feel like it's an important duty for us to, again, not only share our culture and why we celebrate it, but to defend it as well. Going back to this photo, when Ben and I were married, we had about 300 folks there. So we had this, and Nicole and Mark were there when they were younger. We had this before our Christian wedding. And the beauty of it was everybody came from all over the world. In fact, when I look back on photos now of that event, there are people who were there that are no longer even with us today. So it means so much to have all these people come together. It took us days to prepare for this. We prepared several lechons. We did prepare kalding. We did prepare pinikpikan. It was just a major event. But more importantly, it's not just about me and my husband. It was about our communities coming together. It was about acknowledging centuries old tribal traditions and making sure that I serve as a role model for the generations after me, for them to be proud and to claim who we are, what we are, in everything that we do. Part of Ikat, I want folks to understand, is not just to educate our community, but part of what we're doing is also connecting with other Indigenous peoples in the diaspora. We've received so many messages from other Igorots from around the world who say, I know that I'm Ifugao, I know I'm Kalinga, I know I'm Bontok, I know I'm Benguet, but I did not have the opportunity to grow up in community. So we're reaching out to them to connect them, and again, hopefully continue to carry on these traditions, even if we're continents apart. So all of that brings me joy and love, and after that, I will pass it to you, Miss Margaret.
Awesome, cool. So again, to reintroduce myself, I'm Margaret Palaghicon von Rotz, as it says on the slide. I am currently a law student. I attend UC Hastings in San Francisco, so I'm in the city. And my pronouns are she, her. So my indigenous roots, I'm Tuwali Ifugao from Kiangan, Ifugao. I'm also half white from Modesto, California. I was born and raised in the States, and Modesto is where I grew up. And then there's my social media there. So when I think about this question, like what part of being indigenous brings me joy? It's a really interesting question because I don't think I always understood what being indigenous meant growing up, but I always knew I was Ifugao, right? And that was always something that was super important to me. And that was always reinforced by the times that I got to be with my family in Ifugao. This is something I post about pretty often on like my Instagram and whatnot, but my brother and I are the only American grandchildren. So our entire family is still in Ifugao. And so building a sense of identity and community when we're continents apart, as Manang Kirin said, can be kind of difficult. And so something that always brings me joy is when the Ifugao community in diaspora gets together. And so that's something I didn't really get to have as much of until about high school. And there's actually a lot of us here. Like there's a ton, there's people that are my age, there's other folks who are also mixed Ifugao, and we all have ties back to home. And we're all related but not related, but there's something about that togetherness where we just all understand each other is just so special to me. And I found that in Ikat again as well. But I do want to share like one pretty sweet memory. It was from a Christmas party during probably my second year of college. So I went to UCLA. That's also my grad photo, and where I got to wear the tapis as Manang Kirin was talking about. And I'm wearing the same top today. But so yeah, I went to this Christmas party that was hosted by the SoCal Ifugao Association down in LA. And we were all together as all Ifugaos, and we're all just singing and dancing and having a good time. And everyone knows what this is like because every Filipino has a good Christmas party. I'm sure all the folks at Ikat and Bibak, they all have their Christmas parties. Ifugao ones are always a good time. And I remember this one in particular because my mom was able to come down and we're hanging out with her friends. I'm hanging out with the other youth. And then my Tito Joey pulls out a ukulele and then he just starts singing, which like that's when you know it's lit. Like that's when the party really starts. All the folk songs are going. And then everyone started breaking into this song. And to be fair, I don't speak my native tongue. Our native tongue is Tuwali and I don't speak it. I only understand little bits and pieces, but I know what it sounds like. And so they start breaking out in this song in Tuwali. And I didn't know what it meant at the time. I remember having to ask my mom afterwards. And I'm not going to say the name. I'm not going to sing it because it's ours. But any Ifugao knows what this song is. And it's this like meandering song about this guy who's homesick. And he has come on this long journey. And it's just these really boring lyrics about how he finally gets home. He like takes off his backpack. He climbs into his hut and he's cold. So he asks his wife for a blanket. And like that's pretty much it. But it's the emotions and feelings that come with it that to an outsider mean nothing, but to us mean everything. Because that feeling of being away from home and when you finally get back home is so special. And I remember hearing it for the first time and seeing like the looks on everyone's faces. I still tear up thinking about it because there's something about like how you construct home when you're far away that I think everyone in diaspora can relate to is just really joyful. Like there's a lot of joy in that. Even when you miss home, there's still beauty in being together and that togetherness. And I think that's like a common theme among all of our answers. So I just wanted to share that because no way I'm going to sing the song, but I'm thinking of the song right now and it's probably my most joyful memory is being Igoro.
I mean, that's kind of like what Undiscovered tried to do to bring community together.
Right, now we get to do like the virtual version of it,
Yeah.
and I'm with it, I'm for it. So I'm gonna pass it on, I could talk forever, but I'm gonna pass it on to whoever is next. I wanna say it's Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Leo. I am also down here in San Diego. My family is from Kankanai, Benguet, specifically Kapangan. And what I currently do, since we're all saying that, is I work for SEIU. I'm a deputy director down here at our local, down here in San Diego, local 221. So I do a lot of labor organizing work. So what brings me joy, or my favorite part of the culture. It's kind of been touched on here, but I'll elaborate on it just a little bit more. And my favorite part is like the storytelling and how storytelling allows us to pass on our history to one another and allows us to tell our own individual truths. As Marge shared her story and Kirin shared her story, those are the stories that are important to us, Igorot people, Indigenous folks. And currently what really brings me a lot of joy is a lot of folks are finally like listening to our stories, hearing what we actually have been through and we have to say. As Kirin mentioned earlier, you know, we create this group to bring community together, but it's also to make sure that our truth is shared and told and acknowledged. So I think that's really a current aspect of what brings me joy. So, but with storytelling, similar to what Mark said, I really like I guess it's like a song for us folks in Benguet called, it's like the Sali Dumai. And so it's similar to what Marge said. And it's kind of like a song that you sing at parties. And it's like a freestyle song. People just, you probably heard the pop version of it, which is but our version's really fun at parties because like folks just sing the song and they pick up the cadence. And it can be anything, like from I was going home one night and I was drunk and I was having a really good time. And I went to the store to get some food and then I went home, fell asleep. And then someone else picks it up and it says, I woke up the next morning, had a good day, went to church or whatever. So those are like my favorite, that's one of my favorite storytelling aspects at Sali Dumai. And it happens at camp, happens at parties. It's pretty fun. And with that, I'm gonna pass it on to, I think, last but not least, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Diwag. I'm down here in San Diego as well. I'm a librarian, and my indigenous roots are Kalinga Kankanai from Kapangan, Benguet. So my favorite part of being Igorot and what brings me so much joy is dancing. As Jojo said during our webinar in August, when we dance, we smile. And it's the way every Kalinga woman has intricate and unique takes in how she dances her silidsid. So like I'm known for having very high jumps when I do my silidsid and like sometimes pointed feet. Or during Adivai, if you're from Benguet, the way the Kankanai or Iboloy elder calls for the clans from each municipality to stand and present their badu and dances. And of course, the joy is in dancing itself, but the joy also includes the process of having the privilege to learn. So my auntie, Kirin's mom, she always says that like Kalinga women don't move until the beat is right. So if the beat is terrible and the men are getting tired playing, well, that's on them. You better get the beat right before we start moving. And to me, that's like a life lesson right there. If I'm out, or like when I used to go out because, you know, pandemic, and the DJ's playing a bad song, I'm not dancing. But if the DJ plays a terrible transition, oh, I'm leaving. Like that's it. Life is too short to groove to something that doesn't move you. And that's the joy of Indigenous resilience. It's that I have all this knowledge about how to dance and the rituals behind some of these dances that I now get to share with young Igorots, because my joy means nothing if I don't leave something better for them. And people are scared of 240 characters on Twitter. Well, as an Igorota, I have to put up with 240 years of not having Indigenous autonomy recognized and respected, while our culture is, so widely consumed without any regard for the lives lost and battles fought to preserve Indigenous people. So if that means I'll take this continuance of people weaponizing some sort of positivity culture to circumvent accountability, and being called the colonizer's pet, divisive, and savage to this day, I'll endure through all of that for 240 days, for 240 weeks, if it means that young Igorots who will dance next get to do so without any harm. Because I always make this very clear that the people of the mountains taught me how to dance, but the biggest thing is that they also taught me how to move mountains. And so to me, that is not only the joy, that is pride, that is loyalty, but that is also defense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, Nicole.
that's
That's
all
a
I
good,
There you go.
that's a
There
good
you
story
go.
too.
There it is.
You
There it is.
run tell that. Nicole. You run tell that.
So since we actually are a little bit ahead of time, so I want us to take a little bit of pause. We were so afraid of going over time that I think we condensed our joys a little bit. I'm gonna ask my Ikat family here, since we're on this topic of dance and tradition, so much of what we do is tied to the dancing, the gong playing. And what I think a lot of folks don't understand is that tribe by tribe handles this very, very differently. Like we have stories of one of our kinfolk in LA, and big ups to Be Back LA. They were not even allowed to touch gongs until they were much older. They had to practice on tin cans. So ups to the Katanes family, they had to practice on tin cans. Like their uncles would not even let them touch the gongs. Whereas for us here, what's unique, I think, for those of us who grew up with BBAC, and for those unfamiliar, BBAC stands for Benguet, Ifugao, Bunta, Kapayao, Kalinga. They're the 5 tribes that make up the Igorot identity in the Cordilleras. What folks don't understand is here it's so different. Back home in the Philippines, it's not typical for someone who's Kalinga to learn a Benguet dance, for example. That's not done. Here we have that opportunity because there's not that many of us. So a lot of us will come together and learn each other's customs and traditions in ways that's really only unique to the United States. So I appreciate what Undiscovered and Gina and the crew, because there is this conversation about that hyphen. We're Igorot American. And that's a different identity from the Igorots back home versus other Philams who grew up here in California where we are right now. So I wanted to also give space to my other Ikat folks to think about, like, when we learned this, and Jojo and Marge we met later in life. So I would love for you two to also share about how when you came into the Igorot community space, like how was that for you all? Go ahead, Jojo.
Go ahead,
Marge.
Go, Marge.
Oh, sure. Okay, I think I'll go first just because like I feel like I'm newest to the broader Igorot community, even though like I've met other Igorots in the past. But yeah, I met y'all. No, I met a few beforehand down in LA, but mostly I grew up with Ifugao folks, and I grew up trying to like fit my way into the Phil-Am community, like growing up in Modesto, growing up in Northern California. And there were always like slight differences, and I remember having to like try to connect to other people, but we had very different images of what the Philippines was. And it was like kind of a process for me growing up to understand why those differences were there. And so when I really got close to my Ifugao community in diaspora, like everything just started to change, where I just felt seen. I felt, I don't know, I felt like I finally had found a home, and I'd found a family away from the Philippines. Because yeah, I have family on the other side of my heritage, but to not have half of myself be on this continent was really, really difficult. And so to have that with the Ifugao associations was so special and like super important. Yeah, what was the other part of your question, Manang? What was it like?
When did you learn to dance? Did you learn back home then?
Yeah. Oh, good question. I learned to dance here. I didn't learn to dance back home. So when I would go back home to Ifugao, like I would learn about our history. I would go to the museums. Like I would learn so many things, but I didn't learn the dances. Dancing, I learned on my first camping trip. We went to Lake Tahoe back in 2013, and everyone's laughing because it's what
always camping.
Always camping.
Igorot people love camping.
We love to camp.
Sure. No, we love
being inside. We love being outdoors. Like
no, it was so great. Yeah, we were learning. No, we weren't learning. It was all of the older folks were like, "You have to learn. We'll pay you $5 to learn." Oh my God.
They had to bribe you?
Yeah, they had to. Yeah, we were pretty reluctant as teenagers. And then it was so funny because we're like banging these gongs out in the middle of the forest in Tahoe, and so many people complained. Like so many people were like, "Hey, you guys gotta stop. We're trying to have a good time with our families." And we're like, "We do not care.
We're having a good time."
So yeah, I actually got to learn here. And so when I got to college and then saw people like performing dances, it was so strange to me because everyone's got like all this like fancy getup that I've never seen before. And to me, I was like, I did it like really dusty and dirty with my tennis shoes on. and like really haphazardly like trying to learn. And I've gotten to do like more formal versions, and I've gotten to perform like with the Ifugao associations. But dancing is like, it's like Nicole described it. It's really for us, and it's to have fun, and it's to be together. And there's so much to it that I can't even describe, because if you know, you know. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell them the time you almost got married in Ifugao because you did the courtship dance?
Oh my God.
She did get married.
I did sort of get
She got married on the mountain.
I did. So I was there for like an archaeology program, and there was like other American students, and there was this non-Ifugao Phil Am guy. Shout out to Matt. He's probably not watching, but I was Mrs. Matt for like 2 weeks. So I had a lot of rice wine. It was a very good time. It was a harvest festival. And then I was teaching everyone how to do our dance, which was really cool. And everyone like was loving it. And then someone was like, Marge, try this other dance. And of course, me and my rice wine, I was like, I got this. Yeah, and so they like put a blanket on me and everything, and then they're like, oh, have Matt do it with you. And then I found out after the fact that I got married. So yeah, so I was technically a marriage dance. We're cool, we're still friends, we're not married anymore. But yeah, that's the fun part, is like these dances, like we do them for fun. There's also still the meaning with them, and you still learn the meaning and the ritual behind it. But it's like, it's gotten to evolve to a modern context, which I also love too. Like that's the joy in it, is that you're not doing it for the performance of a ritual that you don't necessarily need anymore, but it's still important and still valuable to our community.
Amen. Jojo.
Oh yeah, so I'll guess I'll be brief on this. So my family side, my dad's side, is made in Hawaii, so we never got raised in the community, in the culture. Though my cousins there really knew about it, and I think one of the things that we in the cut that we've been addressing is sort of these lost IPs, lost igorots, right? So and it's very intentional too. It is a defense mechanism. There's a lot of IPs and igorot parents who did not share their culture with their kids because of fear of discrimination, and that's a very common story throughout various indigenous communities here in the United States. And so for us trying to go back and trying to find our identities, we know, like growing up in my, like I knew these cultural traits, but at the same time, like I had no words for it, right? Like, oh, what's Ifugao? I thought Ifugao was just like a province. That's it, nothing special. Until later on, I was like, oh, this is actually my community, my tribe, my people. Yeah. So I had small tidbits here and there, and I didn't really get to know more about my culture. Started going back to Hawaii to see my family there. They would tell us stories. They would show us the gongs, and then going back to the Philippines, seeing my family there. So I guess for me, and it's very common to many like Filipinx diasporic folks, when they try to find their identity, they try to find something back at home, right? But I knew what my identities were, so I didn't have to go to adopt another tribe's culture. Like I wasn't gonna be like, oh, I'm Igorot, I'm gonna try to decolonize. All of a sudden, I'm putting like a kalinga, like clothing on, or playing or buntok dances. Like I think that's the difference for many of us indigenous folks who have tidbits of our culture. We've been generations apart, but we're still connected because of family, because of land, because of the way our family stories are. And again, going back to this importance of storytelling, one of the things that as a kid, I remember looking at the gongs, and I was like, it was hanging on the wall, and I was like, oh, I want to play with it. And they're like, no, if it's hung up on the wall, those gongs are done. You have to use the newer gongs or different gongs, because those are like done by the elders and they've passed away, and that's their gong. So there's also a respect on how we play the music, how we touch the gongs, how we put on our attires, because they're not costumes, right? Because I think that's the big difference between, for us, like we hold these weavings, we hold these things very differently. We don't put them on for a costume. We put them on because it represents our history, our people, our culture, and each design is connected to our village, to what our community sees around us. And the beats of the songs and the dances are also connected. So when we talk about land rights, the song, for instance, like the Dinuya, is about an eagle, and the eagle's connected to the land, and the song represents the land. So it's not just us performing these dances, it's our way to also acknowledge the land, that we're not there anymore. So being Ifugao in diaspora, for me to do the Dinuya, which I had to actually get permission, right? I had to ask my family to can I dance this now? And growing up, they're like, no, you can't, you're not there yet, you don't know anything yet. And so I think, and again, different families, different tribes, different villages have different perspectives on this. And that's also why we can't homogenize even the Igorot community, even the Ifugao community. There's like 3-4 different major groups in Ifugao who dances the dance differently, who plays the song differently, who has different attire. And we understand that as a community, that we know that if you're wearing that color, that design, you're from a different village, from a different community. And I will not wear yours attire and do my people's dance because that's already taboo. Not unless there's a big, kanyao or amungan or everything. But yeah, growing up, I think it's just different for many Igorots who were not raised in the community, but knew through family line, going back out to the Philippines, the storytelling. And sometimes those storytellings of how our families came here and had to try to defend their identities. One, like what Manang was saying, like her family was very proud to be Igorot, but there are many Igorots and many IPs who grew up whose parents were like, they were afraid to be called Egot, to be called Igorot, to be called savage. And so they defended their kids by saying, you're now going to learn Tagalog, you're now going to eat adobo, you're now going to be Filipino. And so there's a lot of us here. And I'm glad that Ikat creates that space for those who says, like, my mom says I'm Igorot, here's our village, here's our family. I need community. And Ikat has been very blessed to have that space.
If I can add one more point to what Jojo just said, because I think like Jojo and I had I guess fairly similar experiences, and that's probably not lost on me. That's because we're both Ifugao. But I think that last part about how we know who we are, and it's never been lost on us who we are from a very young age, but being able to be out and proud and to know and to be able to safely practice our culture and be who we are, it takes a lot of time. And I think that's what the beauty of what Ikat is doing and what each of us have been doing in our own individual lives is as we're trying to be out here and wear our things and do our dances. For what I've noticed for myself, it's brought a lot of healing to my own family, to my mom, who I completely understand the choice that she had to make to not, teach me right away who I was and to teach me right away to be out and about. People would ask her where she's from in the Philippines, and she would straight up lie. And I never understood why until I got older, and I think it just took her the time to process all those experiences of being Igorot abroad and what discrimination that can come with too, and then how to finally heal and what that intergenerational healing looks like when she can finally have her kids ask her the questions that she needs to be able to answer for her own self. And getting to see that type of healing, like at Amungan or Kanyaos, that's when it happens, is when we're able to come together and finally be able to tell our stories in a space together. That's what I love what we're doing with Ikat, because I think it's led to even more conversations with my own family, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Can I just add to, I think that there are so many conversations, not just in our community, but the greater Film community, about how you do this intergenerational healing, right? And I think it's really important that we recognize and be comfortable with the fact that depending on where you're from and your people's experience in the Philippines, that trajectory is going to look different. I've said this before, I said this in Pinaista last week. Our experiences as Igorot indigenous people is very different from the other indigenous folks in the Philippines, very, very different. So I do want to recognize that. I also want to segue a little bit. One of the Igorot experiences I think is always fascinating for me. Something we've talked about internally is how do we translate the traditions, the customs that we have typically back home in the Philippines? How are we able to carry the spirit of those customs here? And I know, Jojo, you have a really good Jollibee story, but before a KFC story. But I wanted to prompt Nicole or Kerri if you wanted to share some examples of how do we live our lives here as Igorots.
Kerri, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Let me just trying to think of something. So a common Igorot dish is pinikpikan, which means killing me softly. And typically you would, I'm sorry for all the people that love animals, but I'm sure you eat chicken. But you would take a chicken.
We're not the only ones.
Yeah, you take a chicken, you beat its wings, then you kill it, because you gotta. There's something about making the blood rush to I don't know.
To its head.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but y'all don't burn
Upside
it, right?
down.
You don't burn the flower.
You turn it upside down and you hold it over the
burn it,
fire.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
upside down
so-
over the fire.
Yeah, upside down.
Traditionally, that's something that
Yep.
that the folks back
You
home
like this.
do. I think like the people in San Diego still do this. I've seen it happen once here in person in Daly
At
City
camping.
in the backyard. No, it was in the backyard.
My dad's backyard, you know that.
In Oxnard.
The Alamany Farmers Market here in San Francisco there was a person that sold live chickens, so that's where we get them. But to remedy that, where you can't exactly always have a live chicken and do all these things, I know my mom was something she would do. She'd find a stewing hen, turn the stove up, burn the skin just to kind of get that flavor in, spread the wings out, and do that. So that's something a little different. That's how we're modernizing it, by not being able to always have access to a live chicken. Yeah, I don't know. What you got, Nicole?
Yeah, I was gonna say, as I get older, and I'm in community with Igorots my age, we held this conversation about how are we going to retain these traditions, how are we going to adapt them as we get older, especially here that we're in the States and everyone's starting to have kids and all this other stuff, and that brings me so much joy, because we understand what our experiences are and we understand how powerful our culture is. But we also know and take into account what the elders in our community say. And we really think about that, because for us, there are ways that we would like to move forward and what we would like to do. But for some reason, there are people who call themselves cultural practitioners or cultural bearers out in the greater Philam community who think that there are still some things that we should keep doing, when the reality is there are actually elders who would want some things to maybe not happen as often, or to just, maybe that is something we should allow to, I guess, just die out. And my full name is Nicole Sally Diwag, and my grandfather is John Sally, and he's one of the people that took and annotated actual notes about all the municipalities in Benguet, how Benguet was built. He actually has notes on how that road was built from Benguet to Ifugao leading up the Bontoc, and has all these notes about how we do Aribay and Kanyao and what each ritual means. And to me, sharing that, I will share that first and foremost with people who are Kankanay in Iboloy and with other Igorots. But what I will not do, out of respect for my culture and for my grandfather, is I'm not just giving that to anyone and anybody. I think there's a museum in Chicago that has a lot of Igorot artifacts, and it's so hurtful that so many people get to see those things. And yet I sit here and I know that I haven't seen it. I don't know if anyone here has seen it, and that the University of Michigan also has all these Igorot artifacts and stories and things that we just don't have access to, when it is ours. It is actually ours. Mm-hmm. So when we are talking about how we share that, how we bring it back home to us, that is a conversation that I see us who are younger Igorots or millennials or the next generation really having, and how we're protecting and defending that, because this is a lot of course correcting that needs to happen. And it's 2020. And we see all these uprisings and protests happen, and the revolution always has room for a reckoning. You may not like it, but it's here. So, put on your big
Yeah.
I gotta say too, like, I know I have some Bontoc Lolas that do have tattoos, and they're like ready to see that tradition die out. Yep. Because for them, it wasn't. In some other tribes, the tattoos are earned, they're like golden, but for some women, it was obviously a show of status and beauty, but that was kind of forced upon them. They didn't particularly want the tattoos, and to have a full sleeve done in the traditional Batak way is very painful. So that is something that they don't mind seeing go away. But again, that's one different tribe, that's literally a certain region that I know about in Bontoc that's ready to see that go. But
that's actually something I learned when I was in Ifugao too, like talking with like family and community members there, is that there are certain traditions, like not so much the tattoos, because tattoos died out there like quite a long time ago, but even some of the other traditions, like some of the chants that we do, or some of like the prayers that you're supposed to do with certain rituals, they've kind of given, I did research on this, which is why like I always talk about it, but they gave way to like a lot of Catholic and Christian prayers. Well, we'll still like butcher a carabao and a pig, but like instead of doing like the traditional like Baki prayer over it, you're gonna do a novena, like your usual stuff, and it'll be fused together. And I think that kind of answers Manong's question of like, how do we keep these alive? It's like you fuse it with whatever you need to. And when I remember asking Marlon, who I like name drop all the time, but he like gave me all this information because I had to interview him for my research, and I asked him like, why don't we do it anymore? Like, what do you think the reason is? And he was just like, we just don't need it. What's it for? And I was like, why do you think we still like butcher like carabaos and pigs though? He's like, well, you still have to feed people. So it's like, that's the
And it tastes good.
it tastes good. And that's the thing. That's why we still have pinikpikan. So a lot of the things that we do, it's like, it still serves its purpose. And that's why we keep it alive, because we choose to. But there are other things that like, as we grow as a community, as we grow as a people, like there are things that we can decide we no longer need or might not serve the same purposes anymore. Like things have changed quite a bit. We're allowed to modernize. We're allowed to do what we want with our traditions. There's still that responsibility and duty to protect and defend whatever we can, but we choose what we're protecting, what we're defending, because that's our job.
Yeah,
And
I kind of wanted to just add, so like this is us storytelling right now, right? And we're kind of sharing like what modern takes that we do as a people. And it's interesting how we're juxtaposing it based on like what we're saying other folks do. And so other folks we don't want other folks to keep telling a story that they say is tied to us when we're here sharing like our versions of how we modernize things and how our people do it when compared to how other folks think it should be, right? And I think that's an important piece for us to like discuss and talk about. And so I think it's really good for all of us here to share those examples, because that's actually from like us, the people, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So in closing, we're about to close up. I want to acknowledge and thank my Ikat folks who are here, all of you who are listening right now. Many thanks to Undiscovered for allowing us to be on and kick off your event. I think in summary, what's so important for all of you out there, whether you're Filipino or not or whatever, it's so important for you to go back and have these conversations with your family, have conversations with your parents, your grandparents, people from where you know you're from in the Philippines, because again, the histories back in the Philippines are so unique. So take that time to do that research and speak to those folks. And then how you translate that for your life here does significantly make a difference. At the end of the day, we're all trying to continue traditions and culture and celebrate that. But be sensitive about that and make sure that whatever you're doing is true to where you are from. And that could be like San Francisco and San Diego, right? What we're doing here is not the same as how folks do it in other parts of the United States too. So any final words from the Ikat folks? Marsh, did you want to go over this slide again because we didn't get to show it at the start?
Yeah, I'll go over it real quick. So yeah, this was the slide I was mentioning at the beginning when we were doing land acknowledgement, and just to remember that like you should never just kick off an event by just naming different indigenous peoples. Like it has to go beyond that. I've been learning that as a process. And so these are just some of the different orgs. I do know that the first two listed, Sogoria Teolantra, sorry, it's like hard for me to read. But yeah, there's a couple there that are specific. One of them is specifically Bay Area, and it's about rematriating the land. Some are about defending their lands. There is one that's a Native Californian language project where they're trying to revitalize Native Californian languages. And there's a couple other organizations there that are a little more broad, some different campaigns that people can support. Definitely look them up on Instagram, Twitter, all of those things, because it's really important that not only we're naming and recognizing who they are or honoring the fact that it's their land, but they're still here. That's the important part of being indigenous, is we're here, right? And we have to give land back to the actual folks here. That was kind of my last piece. So we will definitely be sharing this again in case folks didn't get it. Yeah.
And then if you need to get a hold of us, you can find us. Here are our social media feeds. Again, thank you so much to Undiscovered, to all of you who are out there. Have a fantastic time. Check out all the stages. Check out the vendors. Check out other performers and celebrate who we are today and tomorrow and always.